Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game Hot Takes video. The reinforcement rules have just dropped along with the update to Army with all of the reinforcement profiles. So we're going to go through the reinforcement rules, do a quick explainer and offer some impressions, and then we will dive into every army. Now, what we're going to be doing here is not covering all of the reinforcement profiles in depth. Instead, we're going to cover a sample reinforcement group that leapt off the page for me and looked interesting for every army. So it'll be some thoughts for every army about how their reinforcements work, a very initial impression, and then a sample group that I thought was interesting, or what I'd like to play for that army. And there is a combat group I would like to play for every army so far, which is promising. But first, let's get into the rules. So the rules for reinforcements are only 2 pages, and they are relatively straightforward. It introduces it's a variant, so it's an ITS variant kind of thing, but it's built into Army. Technically speaking, in the same way that Mercenaries is, but with all of these new profiles, it's a much more robust, much more playable variant than Mercenaries, which really is kind of slapped on as an extra. It's presented in a way that is designed to make it very playable, and the kind of obvious expectation is that they are going to wait and see what community uptake of the variant is, but it really is primed to become a major part of Infinity or a major game mode. It does not say that reinforcements are meant to be compatible with 300 points, but based on one game I've had so far, I am vaguely optimistic that the recommended game size for Infinity, 300 points, is compatible with the recommended game size for reinforcements, which is 250 points plus 100 points of reinforcements. I'm not sure, like dead certain, as to whether or not that will actually be the case going forward. I'm not sure if reinforcements optional is a tournament mode that people will consider, but it is something that I'm going to look at and investigate as we get some rubber under the road with this new variant. Now, how does reinforcements work? If you are playing with reinforcements, then you include a trooper with the comlink skill in your list. These troopers usually cost about half an SWC and about 10 points more than a generic line troop, and will almost always give you a small bonus to your army size, usually sometimes +0, but most of them are +1 or +2. So a reinforcement list will typically be 16 or 17 maximum troopers, and then you just build your list. There are no restrictions on combat groups at all. People had speculated on that, but it's not a thing. You can have 2 or 3 if you want combat groups in your main force. You can even bring your reinforcements down in multiple combat groups, although that would be insane and you should never do that. Reinforcements adds an extra step in the player turn after executive use of command tokens, but before retreat or loss of lieutenant check, in which if you've taken casualties, and it's 50 points of casualties for a standard recommended game size, on any turn, that includes your first turn if you're going second and you've taken 50 points of casualties, your reinforcements arrive. They arrive before retreat, so they will contribute to preventing retreat, and they arrive before loss of lieutenant, so a recent update to the chain of command rules means that chain of command will also cancel chain of command if it arrives as reinforcements, so your COC trooper can bail out of the drop pod and seize command of the situation. You then just proceed with your turn as normal, doing your order count. All of the troops in the reinforcements pool will generate their orders, including tactical awareness, if any, although noting that because it takes place after use of command tokens, you can't jump troopers out of or into a group the turn they arrive. There is one exception to that, and that is in the comlink rule, which we'll get to. Once your reinforcements arrive, the turn just proceeds as usual, including progressing into the impetuous phase, which is very relevant for reinforcement profiles. There are a very, very small number of impetuous reinforcements, but it's a really good rule on reinforcements troopers. So just some initial thoughts on this. I like that comlinks +1 and +2 are quite common. I thought that was going to be necessary. We have not seen a comlink +3 at this stage, but there is room for them to add it in future. I think they should. I think it would be cool. But anyway, and the rules generally are pretty simple and easy to understand. I really like that reinforcements can arrive on turn 1 if you take casualties, which means that if you are the player going second and you get kicked in the teeth on the first turn, you don't have to sustain your way through an entire second turn of your opponent having all of their resources before your reinforcements arrive. That in the reinforcements versus reinforcements game is going to be useful and relevant, although there is kind of a second mouse gets the cheese effect in play where the reinforcement pool that arrives second in my test games tended to be very well positioned to attack a reinforcement pool. But if you are going second against a 300-point army, having your reinforcements arrive onto the field at that time actually, I think, will work really, really well. It means that you can absolutely go second with a reinforcement army against a 300-point army if that becomes a thing the community plays. So, actually deploying reinforcements. Here's your diagram for deploying reinforcements. You place the beacon down anywhere on your half of the table. It extends, it's a 40mm token. That's not actually in the rule, but they clarified that. And its zone of control effectively is your reinforcement area. Now, to note, you have to be able to physically place this token on the table. It isn't just nominate a point, and it has to be placed somewhere that basically players agree that the drop pod itself could land. So it's typically going to be an open, clear space, but there is if you scroll up in this page, we can see here that the drop pod can only be placed in a location with enough space to fit it, or in locations that players have agreed that it can be placed. Otherwise, this follows pretty much most of the rules for combat jumping in terms of where you can bail out. So, for example, you can't go into totally enclosed spaces, etc., but it's otherwise fairly flexible. And the very important thing to note here is that you deploy using request reinforcements. It's not something that provokes an ARO. It isn't like combat jumping, which means that you can place your troopers in perfect, totally advantageous positions on your side, on your half of the table. In practice, this is going to mean that arriving from reinforcements is really, really powerful because it is deploying with perfect information and no enemy AROs. On the turn your reinforcements arrive, you can stage them perfectly to attack or defend or do whatever it is you need to do. You can use reinforcements to place repeaters or hackers. You can use it to place models in template range ready to attack immediately. Arriving from reinforcements is very powerful. Now, what limits this mechanic is the fact that there are only going to be so many orders in a reinforcement pool. On the comlink rule there, you can see that even though reinforcements arrive after use of command tokens, so you can't normally swap troops into a reinforcement group, the comlink troop can be moved into that group for free, which means that say you had 4 orders in your reinforcement pool, if the comlink troop is still alive, that'll get you to 5. Most of the reinforcement groups we're going to see throughout the rest of this video are going to be sitting at about like 5 or 6 orders, and that's kind of the sweet spot in order to launch an attack, accomplish an objective. In the test games that I played, I didn't have access to that full comlink rule. I didn't have any comlink troopers, so my reinforcement pools were all going to be playing down about 1 order, and you can kind of feel that. 1 more than I had in all of those games, that feels kind of like the sweet spot, although of course it is going to take an order out of your main group in order to do that. Now, because you can have multiple combat groups in your main list, that kind of suggests to me that a really good place for the comlink trooper is going to be sitting in group 2 with like a couple of disposable elements. I haven't actually written any full links with reinforcements yet, just been playing around with reinforcements pools because they can be spread, like they can be played in any list and they built by themselves, but that's where I'm initially feeling. If I'm not playing a faction that can easily link a comlink trooper to some effect, they're going to be sitting in a disposable combat group too, like in Varuna, for example. A second combat group is going to be something very easily like 2 helots and a comlink trooper. And the helots just do their usual thing, they're fantastic defensive troopers, and as soon as the reinforcements arrive, bam, in jumps the comlink fusilier, and away they go. Also to note, we can see the retreat thresholds have changed. So this is the request reinforcements and retreat thresholds here. So a 250 points starting army can request reinforcements when it has 200 points on the table, and enters retreat when it has 63 points on the table. Now, something that's a little unclear in this chart is that above it refers to the recommended game size being a 350 point army split between 250 points of main army and 100 points of reinforcements. My assumption is that that is this level here, because otherwise, if this is the default, then that would mean you could request reinforcements when you have 250 victory points or less, which would mean either 100 points of casualties, which is way too many, or 0 points of casualties, which is way too few. So my assumption is that it works the way they explained in the video, which is that for a standard game where your main army is 250 points, at 200 points you can call in reinforcements, i.e. 50 points of casualties. The lower victory point threshold is also quite relevant, although to note, it's not totally clear how optional requesting reinforcements is. We can see that it's referred to as obligatory and automatic under the comlink skill, and then there is the use of the word must, but also the use of the word can. Can typically means optional, must means non-optional. I am going to assume in the absence of other information that requesting reinforcements is non-optional, i.e. you have to bring them down as soon as you can. But that is going to be an open question. If you take tons and tons of casualties and you're down below 63 VPs, that would require like 190 something points of casualties. A terrible turn, in other words. You might be able to elect to go into retreat. We ran into this during one of my test games, and I still don't know what the answer is, but I'm going to assume, based on the fact that comlink is an obligatory skill, that requesting reinforcements is non-optional. However, even if it's not, the lower reinforcement threshold means that it will be more difficult to voluntarily trigger retreat by not bringing in your reinforcements after you've sustained many casualties. So yeah, my assumption is that it's either going to be optional, or with the lower retreat threshold, it's just you're going to bring your reinforcements in because it's too difficult to trigger retreat. Finally, on arrival, after you deploy, you can form a fire team, a legal fire team, without the need to spend command tokens. In order to be a legal fire team, you have to meet the usual restrictions on composition. There will be specific fire team compositions in every army, and you have to be within your usual limit of number of fire teams. Every vanilla army has been allowed to include Haris teams for this purpose. There was some outcry about that. However, to note, there are no legal fire teams in any vanilla army for Haris level teams, for 3-trooper teams, except in Tohaa, which already had them. So technically, for example, Haqqislam can have Haris fire teams in vanilla Haqqislam now, but the only way to get a legal Haris team is to form it from your reinforcements. So reinforcements can arrive and form fire teams. If you want a reinforcement pool to arrive and form a core, you can do that. There are some legal fire team cores among your reinforcements, but you can only do that in a sectoral by using your available fireteam core slot. So, initial assessment of the rule itself before we get into the army updates. It's pretty clean. It reads well, it makes sense. We have that one open question about whether or not reinforcements are optional, but otherwise, how to construct your army and how to make it work reads easily and makes sense. I really like that you can bring the reinforcements in as soon as you've sustained those casualties. I like how it interacts with loss of lieutenant, with order counts, with retreat checks, etc. It all seems to work pretty well. Although it's being presented as a variant, it is discrete and complete enough that I can see Corvus Belli wanting to see if this becomes a main way to play the game. If you think about, for example, the N3 to N4 transition, Tactical Window was a variant in M3 and became part of the game in M4, and we know because they've said that they're going to be watching the game and seeing how the community adopts this. So if this becomes popular, then it will become presumably more and more supported. And I could easily see, for example, more reinforcement pools being added to each army in future. Infinity right now has we know that the amount of sectorals they want in any given army is that like 1 vanilla and about 3 sectorals. They don't actually want to do more armies than that. And that makes a fair amount of sense because there are a lot of armies in Infinity already. But if you want to add more stuff into the game, well then having these reinforcement armies as a combination with your main force is a way of, within the constraints of balance and development, etc., adding in further levels of like player customization of their armies without adding in just more whole main armies. Balancing and building a main army is very challenging. Balancing a reinforcement pool within some constraints is probably a little easier. It's very notable, for example, that none of the reinforcement profiles in any faction include things that weren't otherwise considered, like weren't otherwise available to the faction, available to things the faction could do. So we're not seeing smoke grenades in like any sector, in like almost any reinforcement pool, for example, because some sectorals are balanced by or defined by a lack of access to smoke grenades or powerful hacking devices, etc. With some exceptions, but like this is something that you generally see. So like Shazvastia doesn't have that many smoke grenades, and we're not seeing smoke grenades in the XR Commissariat, so you can't just drop a bunch of smoke down to a Shazvastia list that's built in a way that assumes it won't have access to them. So what future reinforcement armies could look like, I could only speculate, but just for example, the Khanate could be a really interesting Haqqislam reinforcement army if it's never introduced as a sectoral. So overall conclusion, I like it. I think it works fairly well. The only concerns I had during testing of the way that based on the way that they had shown us in the on tabletop videos, have been pretty cleanly addressed. The thing that remains to be seen for me is how compatible is this with a basic 300-point game? How well does recommended 350 points of reinforcements versus recommended 300 points of infinity play? And is that something that we can actually have be part of the game moving forward? I'm keen, but if it doesn't work, we're not going to pursue it. My disappointment with the update so far is more with, and I do have one notable disappointment, and that is with actually how it's been implemented in terms of access to comlink profiles. We'll get into this as we go through each of the different reinforcement pools, sample reinforcement pools I built for each army. But just to preface this, they have been extremely conservative, like over conservative, with the addition of comlink profiles into lists. Every faction in the game has basically the same comlink option, where it is at 10 points and it's usually half an SWC. It's very expensive, and it's just slapped onto a generic line trooper, which now has to go into your list. 20 points which is usually how much it will cost, in a 250 point list is a lot, even with the extra troop slots that you'll have from the comlink to try and like take some cheaper troopers to even things out. But more than that, it's just extremely risk averse. Comlinks would have been a very, very interesting way to spruce up profiles that otherwise don't see a great deal of love. A comlink is something like, so just to explain what I mean about that, a comlink is both a points tax and a combat group slot tax on an army. Yes, you're getting +1 combat group slot in many cases, but you already have to expend an additional combat group slot to slap some random fusilier who costs 20 points into your army. It's a tax. Now, that's fine to be an option, but they had the ability to also go and put comlinks on profiles that maybe were kind of edge cases before, but which could see some use in their own merit as something in an army to spice it up. So, like, just for example, PanO Knight Hospitalia Lieutenant. You never see that profile. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not as attractive as other profiles in, say, military orders, for example. Even in military orders, where your lieutenant options are quite limited, you don't really see a Lieutenant Knight Hospitalia. But what if you had a Lieutenant Knight Hospitalia comlink +1? What that would do is it would not occupy the combat group slot that it'll be a curator in military orders, just random curator is going to. Instead, it's doing something useful with that combat group slot, making that kind of like otherwise kind of off meta profile a bit more interesting. My actual genuine dream would be something like a Magariba Guard comlink +2 profile. Is the Magariba Guard good? No, but she's kind of tragically loved by many, many players, and she's still a main battle tag at the end of the day. She's not bad, she's just kind of worse than every other main battle tag for her cost. But if you put a comlink +2 in the Magariba Guard for not many additional points, then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I can put that in the list and I don't have to pay for a tax. Now, having now seen how they do it, would they actually do a comlink tag? Because comlink will allow you to transfer over to that combat group. You probably wouldn't actually choose to exercise that. You'd usually keep the Magariba, in this case, in a primary combat group, just to continue the example. But I feel like that's kind of a missed opportunity. I would really like to see, in future updates, more and more comlinks added, interesting comlink profiles, comlinks that are less of an obvious, boring tax on a list, and which actually do something and present some interesting choice. That's really the biggest, like overwhelmingly the biggest missed opportunity in this whole update, is how just like pay your tax and get on with your list creation that all of the comlink profiles, without exception, are. We don't even, for example, have a Havsa profile in Haqqislam, despite the fact that it was listed as like that was something that would probably be in the update. A Havsa profile would at least have given us a hollow mask trooper to play around with and play some mind games with. No, it's just Ghulams. It's just Ghulams. That's all you get. So, okay, that's a disappointment. It is something that is very, very easy for them to fix in future, but impression of the core rules, they work really, really well. So, with that initial 20-minute appraisal, let's look at some sample reinforcement pools. So our sample reinforcement pool for PanO, this is kind of with vanilla PanO in mind, and it's taking advantage of the fact that we can build a Haris link. We are going to run with a Bulleteer reinforcement Spitfire, a Bolt reinforcement boarding shotgun, and a Blade reinforcement engineer tactical awareness. That's a valid 3-person Haris, and Shona Carano reinforcement, who is just Shona Carano. This is going to be 5 orders plus 1 if the Fusilier survives to join the team, which gives us 6 orders, which is really honestly plenty. That's on the high end for a reinforcement pool. I've been kind of in love with this style of link where you have the Bulleteer with an engineer behind it in Neoterra, and being able to just jump it down in Pan-Oceania, I really like. The fact that we can afford it and still have Shona Carano deployed on the 24-inch line, ready to stab something, is really nice. Shona Carano, by the way, is a piece that in Svalaheimer, for example, she's still quite good because Pan-Oceania will usually have firepower dominance, and what it needs is close assault. And she is pretty good close assault. She's not like you take her after you take Lan Kai, but before you take Gunner, usually is the order of priority for Pan-Oceania and close assault. But it's still a really useful capability. And the fact that you can drop her into any reinforcement pool and just have, boom, here it's turn 2, and I'm slapping down a model that will kill just about anything in close combat, in a position where it can run immediately into close combat, I really like. We're also getting a tactical awareness specialist, some drop bears, that's just cute, and of course the Bulleteer is a repeater, so you can just drop the Bulleteer down as a repeater in some place if that's useful to do. Pan-Oceania is usually not quite as well placed to take advantage of that kind of thing, but you've got it, so you may as well use it. All that comes to a tasty 1 SWC, 99 points. You could take a 23-point bolt, but doing so would mean not having drop bears, and I didn't want to do that. Now, this reinforcement pool, this sample, is obviously missing out on some real high points that have arrived with Pan-Oceanian reinforcements. It doesn't have any of these very, very sweet Swiss Guard profiles. It doesn't have any of the Aquila Guard profiles. It doesn't have a Squalos Mark II. By the way, rip Squalos Mark I. Not sure why that's removed from the game. That model still exists, admittedly not for sale anymore, and is awesome. But Squalos Mark II is a fantastic profile, but we'll see plenty of tags in reinforcements, although not too many in this actual sample list. Nothing wrong with a Squalos reinforcement, nothing wrong with a Swiss Guard reinforcement, but I really like that Haris, and I wanted to be able to use it. Overall, I would say the Pan-Oceanian reinforcements are basically pretty good. They can take some real high top-end stuff that might struggle a little bit with orders, but is nevertheless excellent, and a good mix of like mid to low troops. I don't think you will often see high quantity reinforcement troops. The fact, for example, that you can technically run a bolt core coming out of your reinforcement pod. You can, but I don't know if you will. I think you can just about get 5 bolts in the reinforcement, or 5 troopers in the reinforcement pool that are all linkable and form up that link, but I don't think it'll end up being a pure core because the bolts are just too expensive. But I think you're going to want much more flexible, much more of this like 4 troopers, 5 orders kind of situation with the 1+1 from the comlink. This feels pretty good. The tags will be excellent. Some of the other pieces are quite good. Really like the Pan-Oceanian reinforcement pool, and I think it fits Pan-Oceania very well. And one appraisal that I have seen of Pan-Oceanian reinforcements that I think does bear repeating is that it changes the way Pan-Oceania can play. Pan-Oceania's biggest sort of like weakness or failure state is when they get locked out of reaching the midfield because their range firepower fails in some capacity. PanO lockout is a real thing that can happen. It's just like, whoops, I tried to fight a riot goal missile launcher and everything with a gun died and I lose the game. The fact that now you can guarantee that at least some Pan-Oceanian models will reach the midfield to like play scenario and do things is actually kind of a really meaningful change to the faction, and it means that some Pan-Oceanian lists using reinforcements might instead be able to choose on keeping the midfield clear to allow their reinforcements to arrive. Because like that Bulleteer, for example, that Spitfire range band projecting from the 24-inch line reaches all the way into the enemy DC. That's a fine gun to fight stuff with if you can keep space clear for it to deploy, like clear minefields, clear enemy hacking networks, etc. So this is really interesting. This is where I'll probably start with Pan-Oceania in the event I play a game. Let's move on. So here's our Yuching reinforcements, and we're going to lean for this one. I think this is the only 3-trooper reinforcement list that I'm playing, but Yuching can get away with that. And Yuching also only have a +1 comlink Zhanchi or a +1 comlink Celestial Guard. And I need lots of troops in my Yuching list. I cannot afford to play using lots of troop slots as reinforcements because I want my Guangxi, my Shaolin, my Libertos, all of this junk, right? So what we're doing instead is we're going for a really lean, really dangerous, but still nice high order count reinforcement group. And what we're starting with is Bishia, because Bishia is awesome. Now, there are other NCOs in this pool. You could easily do other ones, but she slaps, and I love her, and the model is incredible. And she's one of those pieces that with NCO super jump, all the mobility skills, and good CC, getting her onto the midfield slaps. So she's in there in a Haris team with a Hayate. Now, this is a silhouette. This is a new profile. We had not seen this before. This is a reasonably tough. So it's armor 5, BTS 6, 2 wounds, silhouette 5. It's not a super heavy infantry, does not have no wound incapacitation, but it's still big, good, and tough with a rocket launcher, heavy rocket launcher +1 burst, and an assault pistol in a Haris team. So that's a burst 4 HRL or a burst 5 assault pistol. And randomly it has BS attack guided, which is just like awesome, fantastic. Yep, I will have my guided troop arrive on the second turn. Yes, it's only a heavy rocket launcher, but like just randomly having that means I don't need to slap a guided missile in the main combat group, which I don't like doing with Jing anyway. 35 points for those guns covering those range bands, especially when Bishia is covering the like 8 to 16. This is excellent, and it's tactical awareness. So we've got a Haris team that already we know can be an NCO with Lieutenant +2 order in a link, plus tactical awareness. So this reinforcements group, although it's only 3 troopers, even if the Zanshi is dead, will have 6 orders to do stuff. Now, 2 of those will be on Bishia, 1 of them will be on the Hete, but that's still a lot and very active. Bishia is a specialist, so we're well covered, and that lets us round out the entire reinforcement pool with a Hwarang Corps. These guys are excellent. Full proper heavy infantry, frenzy discount, light shotgun, Panzerfaust, explosive CCW, martial arts, like, yep, cool. Absolutely banging, 6-2 move. The fact that you can take 4 of those, you might well consider like a genuine reinforcement pool would just be 4 Hwarang and you've got a few spare points. I wanted to do something different. I really like this 3-person team. I will absolutely be using it. Slots a Daoying into a list really nicely. Covers off on like not having to take a guided missile remote because I'll get a guided missile trooper later if I wanted to use one. Yeah, chef's kiss. There are plenty of really interesting things in the reinforcements pool, but this I like. Yes, at some point we will do the 3 Hwarang. I don't think Yuqing is as well suited to that kind of like spammy reinforcement arrival as other factions. In fact, every single Yuqing army except maybe Invincibles really wants it. Really wants all of its combat group slots, and it's not getting any extra really because the Zanshi is just kind of replacing itself. So this lean tight, like being able to get 6 orders onto a dangerous multiple wound 3-person team, this is good. It's not going to. It's an offensive, like it's a very offensive, dangerous. It's not going to arrive and just reinforce a position. There are other reinforcement pools that you'll see that can like slap down a defense. This can't do that. This has to appear and attack. So you better hope that your Daoying is still alive, for example, generating the +2 orders. But if it is, I like this a lot. All right, here's our Ariadna list, and this is the first time we see a trooper, a comlink with +2. So we've got the Lion Kazakh coming in at an extremely hefty 19 points. Comlinks are very expensive. Like, I'm not convinced that 10 points for a comlink is what comlinks needed to cost. We'll see how that actually goes, but like, damn, that's expensive. But this is the first time we're seeing a +2 comlink, and I've made use of that. This is a 5 trooper reinforcement pool. Frankly, I would kind of like it to be less, but Apaches are awesome, so I took 2 of them. I took the maximum number of 2 of them. These guys are really, really cool. They can sit there, they can wait, they can chill out until they need to go and do things, and then they have +1 burst, chain rifles, light shotguns, good close combat, super jump, natural born, like blah blah blah. What they don't have, and which is worth noting, is they do not have martial arts. These are just a natural born warrior trooper with CC 22, but with like +1 burst, chain rifles, heavy pistols, grenades. Like actually, this is a rare troop where I would probably not take the light shotgun because they have a heavy pistol alongside the chain rifle and grenades. I'd rather the bigger template and access to FIS 13 grenades, but I had the spare point, so I took the light shotgun, and it's fine. We're also using Equip Mirage. Now, I am not normally a fan of Equip Mirage, and I am especially not a fan of Margot, but I am much, much more of a fan of her when she has Mimetism, Tactical Awareness, AP Shock, and deploys either that AP rifle or BS-14 grenade launcher right where you want it to go. This is now actually probably one of the like most disgusting spec fire platforms in the game, because you just plop her down in zone of control of the the drop pod, and you just use that tack away to spec fire if you want to. Like, I suspect you'll use that more than you will use the grenade launcher for, like, sorry, her guns to actually shoot things. Like, you might, she's BS-14, but you're often just going to be like, spec fire, dunk, and fire that grenade. And that's trolley. I'm here for that. And then we have Durok, who is one of, I think, only 2 native impetuous reinforcement troops in the game, alongside the diggers. There might be more, but those are the 2 that leapt out at me. Given how dangerous Durok is, chain rifle +1 burst, excellent CC, only an AP CCW, he's tough, he's expensive, he's dangerous, and he's fast. You can deploy him to impetuous straight into melee or straight into chain rifle range, which means that the impetuous order stops being a disadvantage and becomes just like a free order. And because it's a free order, this reinforcement group isn't packing like 6 orders with Margot's Tactical Instant 5 Troopers, it's packing 7 or 8 with the Line Kazakh. Now they're spread out, but that's really relevant. And finally, because we had points left, we have, I think, the cheapest generates an order reinforcement profile in the entire game, the Beast Hunter. It's 9 points for a heavy flamethrower. If I could, I honestly, in testing, you might find that the Beast Hunter and an Apache come out and something for like 26 points goes in. Because Ariadna are also a combat group heavy army. This is using 5 of your combat groups, 5 of your 17 combat group slots, with another one being taken up by the Line Kazakh. So there's not going to be like tons of space left in the main Ariadnan list for stuff. But as far as reinforcements go, the only thing that is like seriously missing from this reinforcement pool, and which you might choose to change, is that it does not have any specialists. As good as the Apaches are, there is a pretty reasonable argument for cutting at least one of them for like a chasseur or something. There are a few good choices, like even a war driver. I have no problems dropping a war driver down. I'm not using, well actually I'm using most of my SWC, but like the 12-point war driver with a shotgun, just because it's going to be a high utility specialist in many scenarios, that might well be worthwhile. You can make that call based on scenario, just change up as you need. Otherwise, the Ariadne reinforcement pool is really solid. This is a great, like Wolfgang Wolf, like that entire profile just appearing in the midfield is much better than a profile in the deployment zone. Para Commandos, same deal. Like this is a really nice, like this is a nice lean profile. That's an AP Spitfire for 31 points with NCI Mimetism and BS-13. Even the Lugaroos, I don't think you'll use the Lugaroos too much in a vanilla army, but the fact that they can actually affordably deploy as a pure core, it's probably going to be more of a meme than a real thing, because you need to, like, you compare 5 Lugaroos, even if they've got 2 Apaches in them, to this, and you know what, actually maybe 5 Lugaroos is close to as good. You can always break that link, because the Apaches, I believe, count as Lugaroos for the purposes of the... Yeah, so Apache counts as a Lugaroo. So you can have a 5-person link, you can take some gunfights, you can break it later, the Apaches can still go and murder things, so we're fine. I could see in some sectorals that maybe don't necessarily feel like they need to run a pure core. I've run Cosmoflot lists that just don't need a pure core at all, they just trade on like Haris teams. I could see dropping a core of Lugaroos and Apaches, except that Cosmoflot also needs like 15 troopers. So we'll see, but this, honestly, this I like. This is the best that Margot and Durok have ever been. And they've always been kind of good, but they've been so expensive that it's often very obvious to an experienced player when they're coming. And now they're just going to bail out of a drop pod and start like hucking grenades. Even just Durok spec firing, like that's gross. The fact that you could just comfortably spend 6 or 7 orders just spec firing high fizz, high ballistic skill grenades from the safety of whatever rooftop you deployed on, that is hilarious. Like that's magical. So the biggest issue with this, obviously, is how much Ariadna might potentially struggle for troop slots, but if you can just get around that, this is a cool reinforcement team. Alright, here we are with Haqqislam. Haqqislam also have a comlink +2, which thank goodness, they really need it. I would like to see more comlinks +2 and even some comlinks +3 on Haqqislam profiles that aren't just a generic pleb Gulam that I'm paying 21 points for. But that aside, we've already seen one battle report from me where I talked about how the Haqqislam reinforcement profiles feel like the class fantasy of Haqqislam, and I think that's absolutely true. You could 100% still run the exact same combat group that I ran before, which was 2 Burtuks, Raman Rouhani, and Layla Sharif, and just appear and fix everything. Now, what this list is doing instead is it's still leaning into that. It's using the cheaper Hakim FTO profile. He is marginally cheaper than Raman Rouhani, while being an equally good doctor and having a +1 burst medikit. But what we've also found points for is this magical Azrael profile. 33 points for a burst 3, damage 16, continuous heavy shotgun that just appears and shoots things. I don't actually know how good this will be because this will be highly susceptible to hacking. But the idea of just like plonking this thing down, like if your opponent has dropped a tag as their reinforcement, and then you just drop this next to the tag. That's wonderful. That's just really nice. That's a magical moment that you're about to experience as they quietly wet themselves and decide if they want to take continuous damage 16 template hits or armor piercing damage 16 hits. Like, fantastic. We've got only the one Botak. I would love to have two, but there just weren't points. What I can see happening eventually is something like massaging this around to try and fit Azrael, Bertak, but it's not going to happen, right? The Hakim has a Nazmat. It will almost certainly arrive and support the Azrael while trying to recover something else. And we had enough points left for a Hakim, a Hawa KHD. There's nothing magnificent about this profile, but it is a killer hacker arriving at the nick of time with a boarding shotgun. It's kind of just for a couple of points less. It's cheaper than Layla Sharif. And the boarding shotgun and mimetism are kind of relevant. At 20 points with EM mines in particular, I'd probably take, and Ballistics BTS 3, I'd probably take her if I had 2 more points, but it's a pretty close run thing. Otherwise, for me, Botox are still like one of the huge clear winners. This profile is just excellent. Immunity, continuous damage, good armor, good BTS, mimetism, no wounding cap, good weapons. Like in particular, these two profiles, the SMG Emerat and the SMG Heavy Flamethrower, I love having one of each of them in a reinforcement team because you can deploy them based on where those templates will do the most good, where the Emerat and Heavy Flamethrower will. Because I can only take one Bertak in this reinforcement pool, I've gone with the Heavy Flamethrower on the grounds that if there is something I would have badly messed up with an Emerat, I'll probably badly mess it up with the Azrael. So notable for their absence are the Corsans. I don't think Corsans are good. 14 points for a +2 burst single wound chain rifle with some average close combat is not good. Like I know it's got climbing plus, but these are not particularly attractive profiles. They're not like terrible. Well, they'll climb up and shoot something, but this is single wound. Like single wound. This is a warband for way more points than a warband. This is not crash hot. Similarly, Odalisks are still not particularly good. They're not terrible. They're certainly better as reinforcement profiles where all of that stuff can just arrive and do things. But the ideal use case for them is still just dropping them down and slapping them in suppressive fire, and that's not particularly exciting. There is way, way more and better stuff. Habsas as reinforcements is kind of sad as well. But that doesn't really matter because there is tons of juice in the Haqqislam reinforcement pool. All of this stuff I really quite like, and the fact that Haqqislam can just drop down really high quality engineers and doctors and just recover everything that's downed. I'm going to be putting, so I already like Sundukbuts, but the total reaction Sundukbut is, it's a little bit of a sometimes food, but I really like the AP Spitfire total reaction Sundukbut when Neurosynetics, where you can just put it somewhere relatively aggressive in the knowledge that a Bertuk is just going to drop down next to it and fix the damn thing. So yeah, overall, Haqqislam living up to the class fantasy of like the trauma team arriving, but with a particular note that Azrael reinforcement profile for 33 points, that is lean and dangerous. Really like it. All right, on to Nomads. Nomads are notable for having, I think, the only or one of the only 0 SWC comlinks, although again, it's still like, yay, it's 19 points for a moderator, 19 points for a moderator. Cool, I'm playing with a 231 point army, I guess. With the Nomads, I probably had the hardest time building just like a sample reinforcement pool for. And so we've just gone for a meme instead because it's Nomads. Lizard, everyone. I don't not actually love this Lizard profile that much. What is notable is that it's the single toughest piece that can arrive from reinforcements. It's tougher than a Cascuda, it's tougher than a Squalos Mark II. It's full-on armor 8, just bailing out to do some stuff, with tactical awareness. But this is not an AP Spitfire, this is just a Spitfire, it's just damage 15. And that's going to let you down from time to time. It's real hard, for example, for just like a generic damage 15 to fight a really heavy infantry or a tag on like ARO. So I am not actually expecting great things from this. I think this is more of a meme than actually good, and there are almost certainly better Nomad options, but it's still a pretty good meme. We can staple a Mars spider to it as an engineer. I don't think you'll actually be engineering the lizard particularly much because the lizard is not it's a manned tag. But if nothing else, then you can do some stuff with combat. And, the Mars spiders are surprisingly good in close combat with martial arts, CC attack +1 burst, and CC 23, and you can duo them for this is a DACCW that is effectively going to be burst 3 in close combat. So look, this is cool and fun. There are probably, frankly, better things to explore in vanilla Nomads, in Nomads reinforcements. The reinforcement Spectre profiles are very attractive, just for example. And the fact that you have 13-point stemplers. Now, this is very relevant because it's missing a bunch of stuff off of the base stempler profile, but it is still a repeater and AVA2. The fact that you can just your Morans are dead. Well, it's a shame if you were to just deploy prone, and you can deploy reinforcements prone, by the way. Reinforcements are deployed, so the usual rules apply. The fact that you can just be like, cool, 26 points of my reinforcements is just going to replace 2 repeaters in the midfield. Excellent. That's going to really suck for my opponent who spent all of this time dealing with Masai Morans. I've only got one in this list, but if you can afford the combat group slots, just refreshing your combat group, your repeaters in the midfield. You can do that with Lunacods, or Vostoks, or Cyclones, or whatever. There's tons of repeater options. It's probably going to be Stemplers and Vostoks most often, but there's plenty of arguments for mucking around, for example, with the heavy shotgun Lunacod profile, if you've got the points and are saving the combat group slots. Rail Spectre is also present. He's an absolute banger, and we've seen it's the rounders who have marksmanship and MSV1s, also excellent. I began with the meme, but I think really you're going to see better and more nuanced Nomads reinforcement pools probably almost immediately, in point of fact, but this was fun. It's where I wanted to begin. So for combined army, now notable here, the Unidron, in fact all of the combined army comlinks, the Unidron is the best one in vanilla because it does something unlike a frickin' Morat Vanguard Trooper. It's a plasma carbine, it's a dogged plasma carbine. What do you want? This is the first, 24 points is still an egregious amount for Unidron, but it's the first comlink profile that I'm like, oh, that does something. That doesn't just sit in a deployment zone generating an order waiting to die. Now, the Cascuda, yes, is the big, piece de la resistance for the combined army generally and reinforcements, but in honor of good friend and longtime opponent Owen, we're going to make Kodali work. So how we're going to do this, this is a 3-person team and a solo operative. What it's probably going to be, you can actually form a fairly flexible number of teams with this, but I think we're going to go probably Vector Reinforcement off by themselves using Super Jump and doing various things, and then Kodali, a Void Operator, and a Nexus as a link team. I believe that's legal if we take a look. Yep, Void, Vector, Nexus, and then Kodali is a wildcard call. So there's a lot that you can do with this. This is a very flexible pick 3 to be your link. You might honestly want the Vector in there because giving that multi-marksman Mimetism MSV2 rifle +1 burst is very good. And then you just maybe you have Kodali by herself. That's fine as well. This is going to go in something like a vanilla combined list with lots of Datarazi. Or equally, a Morat list with lots of Datarazi, and those Datarazi are going to get to the midfield, and they're going to lay a bunch of smoke, and then Kodali is going to appear and finally get into close combat. We're going to live the frickin' dream, and she's going to get her Protheon, and it's going to happen. I really hope this happens. Look, otherwise, this is not by any sense of the word, this is a good 4-person squad. The Vector is excellent. The Vector is very, very good. There's nothing wrong with this at all. It's easily the best non-Cascuda Exo profile, and frankly, it's competing with the Exo in terms of things that it does. Kodali, this is probably the best that she has ever been. Appearing as a reinforcement profile is ideal for her because she gets to come down somewhere she can make a difference. Her big thing is she is a real, she's hell on earth if she just gets those Prothean wounds, but deploying her in any of the ways she currently deploys just requires her to do things that are challenging. Whereas the midfield as a reinforcement model with some backup, that feels like it's the best that she's going to be, and 33 points also means that she isn't paying for forward deployment, she isn't paying for infiltration. This is as cheap as she's been as well. So we're going to slap her in a link with an NCO and a boarding shotgun and some mines and just be like, we're going to make this work. Is this going to work? I don't know. Should this just be a Cascuda? Like, Cascuda's pretty good as a reinforcement profile. The damn thing is like 53 points? Yes, okay, it's only got a combi rifle. I don't care. It's appearing within 6 inches of the enemy. That's totally fine. It's tactical awareness, armor 7 tag. But this this I have some hopes for. Other standouts, these drones are really weird. The fact that the T drone is still guided and drops like a +1 burst light rocket launcher. There's a burst 3 rocket launcher for BS-12. That's pretty good for 16 points. The Q drones, none of them are total reaction. They're just like, hey, mimetism plasma rifle for 19 points, just one SWC. I do not know what to make of these. I think you could genuinely have a reinforcement team that drops that is all drones, one engineer. Well, where do we get it? I think there is an engineer in the one base operator engineer for 19 points with like a slave drone, and then just drones, just one Q drone, one T drone, whatever, 2M drones, I don't care. That's an interesting setup. It's very SWC heavy because you're paying, like you're using all of your loot points on those drones. But like that's kind of weird and interesting. I don't know if it'll be good, but it seems at least viable, provided you have the combat group slots. I also think I like the Umbra Legate as a reinforcement profile for many of the same reasons that like it's like legates are the poor second cousins of Samaritans because they're trying to do so many different things. It's like, I'm a mimetism gunfighter, but I'm just BS-12. I'm good in close combat and 6-2 move, but I'm paying for all of these guns. Whereas a Samaritan knows what he wants to do. He's going to eat you, get 3 wounds, and go and hack some stuff. But I feel like 6-2 move with stealth and all of this stuff, again, very expensive, but NCO is a good skill on reinforcement profiles. This might finally be the time for Umbra Legate, particularly the boarding shotgun, the fact that it can enter a marker state, go and kill some things, hack some stuff. I'm not optimistic, but on the other hand, I'm trying to make Kodali work, so who knows. Overall, the combined army reinforcements are probably going to be some of the more challenging ones to make really, really sing, but there are a bunch of ways that you can play it. Extra are only part of the show here, and they're cool. They're lovely. They're gonna be lovely miniatures. The new Extra vibe is less classical than the old Extra vibe, but like I'm still here for it. But I don't know the extent to which it's going to be the Extra show or this like other kind of weird but probably pretty good stuff. All right, Aleph. I promised you a spam reinforcement list. This is the spam reinforcement list. Daewon TACbots now they're only dogged. They're not no wounding cap like the Apaches, but Daewon feels spammable to me. And in particular, they feel spammable. So Dakini, again, we've got a no bonuses here. This is a Dakini without comlink +1, and I think that's actually intentional, unlike the combined army stuff. Not sure though. It would make it the only comlink with no bonuses. But Aleph has no problems whatsoever running a 10 trooper combat group and just being like, yep, this is fine. Aleph have post-humans, which means they have ablative defense. You can just ease anyone, like 250 points, 10, even 250 points, 9 troopers plus the random Dakini for Aleph, not a problem at all. Which means that we're going to go spammy here. When the reinforcements arrive, they're going to arrive with a bang, with 5 or 6 orders to spend, and the Daewon are just excellent. They are not frenzy, they get full benefit of cover and everything, but they have dogged, template weapons, long range weapons, and +1 burst multi-pistols to close in and then kill things with EMCCW and martial arts. Like, this is a package. If you wanted to, I've got an engineer in this group as well. You can even like hit them with things and then recover them. It's an NCO engineer, by the by. Hit them with things and then recover them. Like these things scare me. For 19 points, I've taken like a couple of different profiles. These things are gross. The Artalis is going to add in an engineer, obviously, and then we have the Asparis. 19 points for the Asparis for a like really good killer hacker. This is a hacker with Trinity +1 damage, just arriving in the midfield to push some buttons and save the day. That's like really good. I don't know. I do not. Well, actually, I know why. There's a 20-point version that is just a KHD that also has Trinity +1 damage. It's got a boarding shotgun rather than an SMG. She's just going to appear on a rooftop somewhere and hack some fools. I am very much here for a lot of these profiles, but this is like it's really interesting how there's plenty of heavy stuff. Like you can look, it's Maximus, 70 freaking points. This might not actually work. 70 points for a reinforcement trooper gives you like nothing. Like yes, he's got tactical awareness. Yes, technically he's chain of command, so could like loss of like save your loss lieutenant. I do not know if Maximus for 71 points is going to work in a generic reinforcement pool, but Aleph, because they're so good at running 10 trooper lists, thanks to mostly things like posthumans, they can spam things like that one. Also, I do think, special mention to the Arjuna, is this finally time for the Arjuna to be good? Yeah, maybe. It's got tactical awareness and is a specialist with 13. It's an okay profile. Much like a lot of other things, deploying these Kieran bots as reinforcements is going to be much, much stronger than trying to actually get them up the board. If they didn't have tactical awareness, that's a recent change, I believe, then Arjuna would actually potentially still be really good as reinforcements. And that's specifically because being able to just drop those Kieran bots as a, like, your problem now, they're in the midfield piece, is very, like, that's very disruptive, even if you don't plan to attack with them. And I can see using tactical awareness just to reposition them, like shove them 8 inches forward. This might actually be genuinely good, but to start with, I am here to just be freaking basic and play 3 Daewon and go and kill things. Note, martial arts level 2, yeah, they EMCCW on some of these profiles, but you will also often actually use the multi-pistol in close combat mode because it's a multi-pistol plus 1 bursting fire double action ammunition. So this one shock CCW honestly should probably be the chain rifle rather than the pulsar because it has an EMCCW, but you've got the multi-pistols to fall back on. These things are very good. Some of the best, like, CC just kill things reinforcement profiles that we've seen. Alrighty, Tohaa. Did you know that there is an entire multi-page thread called something like "Disappointing Tohaa Reinforcements"? I did. I read it. I probably shouldn't have. Tohaa reinforcements there are, technically speaking, no new, quote-unquote, reinforcements models, but the reinforcements that Tohaa have are really interesting. I have gone with this setup because it comes to exactly 100 points, and dropping mirror ball troopers on rooftops to just, like, be mirror ballers is baller. What we are here, like, these Agal for 18 points have got a seriously high chance of just, like, stabbing something to death. But what we are really here for is the Rassails. Rassails are disgusting as a reinforcement profile. I actually, like, very, very seriously considered just having this reinforcement group be this. Actually, I think I can fit in yeah, I can go 35 points to get the viral combi. Yes, this doesn't have many orders. That's true. However, this is only 3 combat group slots and drops 12 wounds into the midfield. 12 wounds into the midfield with a bunch of template weapons, including heavy flamethrowers. Like, they don't have to do, like, anything at that point. Your opponent is just like, oh god, it's more Tohaa. This is, like, yes, I am here for the Tohaa reinforcements. Like, other very good options, Ektros. The Ektros profiles are, look, I use my lieutenant orders as Tohaa. I don't need an NCO. Nima Sitar, though, 35 points for Nima Sitar as a reinforcement profile. Yeah, that's proper good. But if you drop her, you probably need to drop a link for her to form up around, so it's a little trickier. The big challenge with Tohaa reinforcements is deciding the extent to which you want to customize them to the mission. How much do you want things, for example, like specialists? The probable best specialists will be the Corsair Assault Pioneers at Whip 14 Engineers, in particular the 29.1. So I have had this profile used against me to good effect. It's a K1 combi rifle, which makes it an anti-tag gun, and hey, once again, dropping it inside good range of an enemy piece is pretty nice. If you can range it in on an enemy tag, and Tohaa reinforcements, by the by, are the only reinforcements that have even any ability to generate smoke. We've seen no smoke grenades, especially no eclipse on any reinforcements, but mirror ball. It's only whip 13, but it's mirror ball in reinforcements. Tohaa, very, very interesting. Super here for the Rassails, even Sakiel Regiment. Sakiel are super efficient, and you can just, like, look, it's EM grenades on a Fizz 11 model. You can just slap a bunch of Sakiels into the midfield, and that would be an equally viable. Like, if I just go Put 3 of them in a list. That's 6 more wounds. We've got points left over. I should probably put like a Spitfire in there or something because we've got tons of points. Sakiels as a potential reinforcement pool gets you a specialist. Oh look, they've all got EM grenades. But what I'm here for. I think I'm genuinely here for the Rassails. Rassails are terrifying as a reinforcement profile. It fits them thematically, and they're super well suited for it. You will almost, not certainly, because there's some other stuff in here as well that's kind of interesting. Chaxas, for example. We've got a 14 point, not a 10 point, unfortunately, but you've got a 14 point Chaxa profile with an emitter that gives you your sensor, etc. But I think, or at least the way that I'm going to be doing it, is most Tohaa reinforcement pools are going to start with a Rassail. The viral combi or the light shotgun profiles are both very efficient. This viral combi has kept the weird discount that it seems to have in the main Tohaa army. I don't know why it only costs 1 point more than a combi rifle shock mines, but it does. Very, very, very good. Very interesting. Being the only reinforcement pool with any smoke at all, and it's mirror ball of all things. Yeah, Tohaa, super interesting. The big question is just, can you make a Tohaa list work with fewer points and in particular, fewer combat group slots? And that's part of why I'm considering just running a whole bunch of Rassails, because it's only 3 of them. Yes, it'll be a very, very small order pool, but it's Tohaa, and I'm pretty used to running more troops in Tohaa. Either way, very exciting. Might be playing a game with these soon. Not sure, but really interesting. All right, non-aligned armies. This is probably where it gets closest to disappointing. The War Driver Hacker Zero Pain, again, it's a comlink with no bonuses. I'm not sure if that's intentional because, by God, do non-aligned armies need more combat troop slots. All current evidence suggests that this is actually intentional, and that's really bad because I'm using the full 5 combat group slots here, and like I can't make a Dash Out Company list with, well, actually Dash Out Company will have Ghouls, thank God for that. But like Spiral Corps, for example, I can't make a Spiral Corps list with 10 troopers in it, 9 troopers in it after the War Driver. So that puts us in a situation where we have to take the Anaconda, and the Anaconda don't, just to put it bluntly. The Anaconda, this is a crap profile for reinforcements. Yes, it's an AP Spitfire, which is one of the heavier guns that you can drop, but this thing is not good. It's only BS13. Like, you compare this to, it's like 38 points for the Azrael Spitfire. Yes, there's no tactical awareness, there's a survivability difference, but there's also a damage difference. The Azrael is scarier, it's continuous damage, and it's way cheaper, and it's surrounded by better things. So I am not optimistic for most non-aligned armies. I think Dash At Company might be okay because they have Ghouls, so fingers crossed there. But setting aside how hot Garbo the War Driver profile with no bonus to combat group sizes is, the reinforcement pool is actually pretty cool. Samsa is a super lean profile, 26 points. Yes, he's effectively single wound with no way to recover him. If he takes a wound, he'll die. But he's a Mimetism Super Jump Plasma Rifle for BS13 for 26 points. He is, every now and again, he will get crit and die, and you'll be very sad. But for 26 points, there are not many models in the 26 point range that can potentially just grossly outperform, and a super jump plasma rifle can grossly outperform. So he's super cool. That's really good. Diggers are also really, really solid as reinforcement profiles because they are impetuous. It's like Duroc writ large. You can slap them down and let them go with the impetuous orders, and it gives you basically an extra order. Now, because they're diggers, they even have booty, with which they will roll grenades, and you will be sad. But they can even potentially high roll, and they can link. Now, you'll deploy them. How I am planning to do this is I'm going to deploy Miranda, the Brawler, and both diggers, and I'm going to form up a link with whichever digger I would like to be linked based on what they roll for booty. I may not have that luxury, but it's the basic plan. So we have these 2 diggers, one of them, maybe both, but at least one will be impetuous, and then we will have Miranda and a Brawler Doctor. You need 1 Brawler to form the link, but since these Miranda especially is doctorable, 19 points, may as well. Miranda, I actually genuinely kind of like. This is nice. She's got tactical awareness, mimetism 6. There's nothing wrong with her as a profile. She doesn't have the same capacity to outperform that Samsa does with the template, but she's totally fine as well. Like as far as single wound gunfighters go, she's burst 4 with that multi-rifle. She's gonna kill some things. It's just that the problem, like this is by itself a super sweet reinforcement pool. The problem with it is that it has to go into a non-aligned army, and like they just don't have enough combat group slots much of the time. This is like going to suck for Spiral Core. It'll be probably okay for Dashat. It'll be probably okay for any of the other factions that have got like decently sized comlinks. In fact, hold that thought. Yeah, so I just went and checked. Frickin' Rip Akari Company and Rip Drew's News at 11. Actually, Drews are a really good faction, but or quite good faction, really interesting. But Drews and Akari Company and Spiral Core are the notable casualties here because they are factions that have no options other than that crappy War Driver that has no bonus to combat group size. And Akari Company and Spiral Core both do not want to be pinned. Like Spiral Core would be able to manage at like 12 slots because you just have the old two helots in combat and two helots in a combat group, and that's okay. But Ikari Company, trying to run Ikari Company at 10 combat group slots is, oh, it's going to be a real challenge. And honestly, what that tells me is that if it is possible to play 300 points against 350 reinforcements, and those are a balanced experience, you're just not going to play reinforcements as a Akari Company. Or you might do a list that's like, Wooming, here we go, all heavy infantry, and then you run an actual Akari list, like doing other stuff with Akari with the other list. But yeah, this is going to be probably rough on these factions. I like the reinforcement pool that I just came up with. I've lost now because I had to go and check those profiles, but I do not like how it fits in the absence of decent comlinks in those factions. All right, and finally, on a slightly brighter note, O12. Nothing wrong with Kappa. Kappa is linkable in Stamata. Cool. Again, 22 points, very expensive. Comlinks seem to be very expensive. This was honestly one of the weirder ones to actually look at and then figure out what I wanted. What we've gone with here is a Dakini Haris team with an Oko and a Deva, and then free running Cuervo Goldstein. The Oko is a specialist. You'll be able to support with the Dakini if you want to. I would not normally put a HMG on a reinforcement team, but that Deva acts as kind of like a tip of the spear by you're dropping down a repeater and she's a really good quality killer hacker, like no wound and cap, BTS 3, whip 15, excellent KHD. And so I just put a heavy machine gun in there because it cost 21 points and is burst 5 mimetism. It was honestly kind of weird how little many of the other profiles resonated. Like, I don't personally love bronzes. I think they're 54. You can't pay 54 points for just some random freaking dude with which bronzes are in a reinforcement pool. Nightshades, as we kind of know, are an awesome close combat model with a shock CCW. Okay, fine. There's plenty of other decent stuff. The Mimetism 6 is really nice. The S12 Mimetism 6 is like pretty good, but like don't seem to quite fit. Psychos with Wild Parrots, very nice. And they've picked up Dogged on their reinforcement profiles, which they don't have on their main profiles. But that actually, look, that might change. I didn't even see this in my first look through. Dogged on a boarding shotgun climbing plus. There are other factions that will do that better. For example, the tac bots in Aleph, but that's still kind of cool. I could definitely see the use of some Sarkos. Probably the boarding shotgun. I love the Wild Parrot, but you need a template weapon on a BS11 Trooper to make good use of Dogged. But what we've gone with instead is Cuervo Goldstein. He's a Chad, and he's going to appear, and he's very tough and dangerous, and will kill some things. This is very like underbaked, and the profile that is really noticeably missing is the Vidox. These are just Psychops that play slightly differently and are really good. Like NCO is very good if you are not taking a strategist lieutenant, and Mimetism, MSV1, multi marksman, NCO is awesome. 25 points. I run Psychops, which these basically just are in Stamata and Vanilla, and I will comfortably run these in O12, but I just wanted to fit these different things in. The Dakini Oko Deva link, it's Aleph at home. But yeah, I'm not particularly like jackboots do not hugely appeal to me. I don't think they're bad, but I don't think they're particularly good. And bronzes do not appeal to me. That leaves the robots and the Sarkos, Vidocs, Ments, like these are all fine. Quovo Goldstein and um, Casanova, though, are like they are very interesting. They are not that expensive. 30 points is on the expensive side, but they're robust, right? Like Casanova, I had 4 points. I put Casanova in over, so put Quovo in instead of Casanova. But like Casanova is in particular, I think, really, really solid. Very dangerous in CC. Very dangerous in CC. And an NCO, and no wounding cap, mimetism 6. Like, honestly, Casanova might just be better than Quovo Goldstein, but I had 4 points. Sue me. Especially the presence of NCO, I think, like really has some interesting potential on these profiles. They are the like really pointy end of what you can do with a well-placed reinforcement model, and you can just slot that around. If you want to spend 4 points in this list, just go for it. Let's just drop Quovo out now and put in Casanova with probably the EM mines. And I've got 5 points of underspend now that I don't know what to do with. Can we fit in a better Deva hacker? Doesn't matter. We'll figure this out later. This basic thing with O12, where it's like a Casanova and some friends, I think is very interesting. You could do these 3 pieces can be anything else. O12 are a faction that can definitely flex into and out of their number of troop slots. If I'm going to go down to say 12 troopers in O12 or Starmada, I don't hate that nearly as much as I would in some other factions. I think they're probably okay in that space, and particularly in Starmada, you'll often link this Kappa, I think. In my games with Starmada, I did not run Kappa links much or at all, but I could definitely see like a Psychop. Actually, I did run them, but they were running very small. I could see cutting a Kappa hacker that I've used previously, finding the points, and making a link that's like Psychop, Kappa, Comlink Specialist Operative, and then one other thing, maybe a Secudroid or something, and then being pretty comfortable breaking that up because the Psychop's going to go and do its own thing just fine anyway. It's a complete package. So this I like. I think O12 have some real misses in their reinforcements, particularly with bronzes and jackbots. Like just get out of here with that stuff. But the other pieces, particularly like Casanova, very interesting. Okay, I've been talking for an hour and 5 minutes. We've done a full. At this point, this take has gone from hot to kind of lukewarm. But nevertheless, I hope you've enjoyed this. You can definitely expect to see some reports coming up, battle reports coming up, both reinforcements versus reinforcements, and I'm going to continue to try and look at reinforcements versus non-reinforcements, but probably won't see anything from me over this weekend because Baldur's Gate 3 is coming out. I'm sure you all understand. I was a child when Baldur's Gate 2 arrived, and we are going to be playing. We're going to be playing that game. I'm going to be enjoying myself immensely. Nevertheless, definitely expect to see some Infinity content covering reinforcements in the future. As always, if you enjoy the content I make and would like to support me, you can do so via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below. My videos will always remain free online and will be available here on the YouTube channel as soon as they're finished uploading. But if you'd like to support me, I would greatly appreciate that. Otherwise, look, I hope you enjoyed this. Very interested to see how this progresses with the game, how the community takes it up, what the general appraisal is. I will see you next time.